Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there. Welcome back.
This was a comment over on Patreon by one of our dear family members and friends for many, many years, Zach, saying, great video, thank you. This is in regards to yesterday's video where we're talking about, that big machinery of the system that is just intruding in all of our lives. Yes, the data centers. He says this is our great calling back to spirit and earth. Absolutely. He's going out to rough it camping for at least the summer, going out remote with some people and just getting in tune with nature with a little tribe. And, this gets me thinking of all the signs around us all the time. Green lights in the Hawaiian sky. Is it a comet? What's going on? Is it the failing magnetosphere? Is it alien visitors? What's going on? This is, Space Weather Ben looking at the signs, northern lights in Hawaii. What's really going on? Comet. Well, we got Comet Pan-STARRS, C2025 R3. As you see from a few days back going on by, we literally go through its tail. What does it bring? Comets are harbingers sometimes of doom, of certainly key events. They're always viewed as bringing key events. They're bringing in something important. And really, what is a comet? We're told it's an icy rock. I think a lot of times they're simply ships. And so when you see a ship, you don't always know who's in that ship. Are they good? Are they coming out for conquest? What's really going on? We've been told so many times that things that are ships are anything but a ship. And then who's driving them? Who's steering them? How do we get to this place in this world where so much of humanity was clueless to the fact that we have never been alone? Again, we have disclosure. It's already been given. But still, it's so hard for so many people to understand and accept that there's all sorts of civilizations out there. What does it have to do with European colonialism? Everything. It's through European colonialism that we basically wiped away what all of us always knew in the more tribal situations, when we were in tune with the earth, when we were living in harmony with the earth. That's not necessarily going to be a utopia, especially in a Kali Yuga, because some people will say, well, the tribes, the natives here in the Americas, they were always fighting. They were at war with each other. Yeah, it was a Kali Yuga. It was an era of darkness in the sense that we've lost track of the fact that we should be living together in a very, very symbiotic way, realizing we're part of something bigger, we're part of a whole. And what did European colonialism do? Well, again, you look at the nations of the world and you understand that the European system is what's been used to literally wipe away older traditions and knowledge from the entire world. There's very few pockets now where you don't have that European colonialist, that Western world system. You could view it as capitalist, but hey, it also includes the communist nations of the world when you look at it from the bigger perspective. Those beings that have controlled through conquest have washed away so much of the traditions, the history, the knowledge that we had shared for eons with our children growing up. The whole way that they used to revere the elders and hold the elders in respect, instead of sending them away to some home to be taken care of by strangers, they would take care of their elders when their elders got older. They would still be part of the extended family. Look to Africa before European colonialism, and what do you see? Well, there's a lot that's been hidden there. Because we could say, well, they were living a simple life tribally. Not a lot of technology and all, but the the reality is, again, a lot of things have been totally hidden and washed away. When you look at maps that show the Sahara Desert being an area of lush greenery, mega cities, and lakes and rivers and streams, just literally 500 years ago, what could really have turned it into such a brutal desert with nothing apparently there? Again, I think it's the system. And when we talk about European colonialism, in my mind, that goes straight back to Sumer and Acadia. It goes back to the Sumerian city-states, which, again, I view that as the origin of European colonialism. It actually went to Europe from, again, the Fertile Crescent, from those ancient lands that there's constant war over. When you look at the religions of the world, this map shows Christianity in the green. It's the dominant religion, and then what's next to it? 33% Christianity in this particular map, 22% Islam, and Islam is slated to overtake Christianity in perhaps another 20 years or less. But basically, the Abrahamic traditions dominate. So when people look at the world, they look at the world through a conditioned lens that is basically Christian/Islamic, again, Judeo-Christian as Islam. That's the lens. So again, when you look to origin stories, and instead of many native stories telling their kids and their ancestors, where do we come from? We come from the stars. That was the dominant story. We come from out there. We came here from elsewhere. In other words, we ourselves are not native to this planet, yet our bodies are made up of material coming from the planet. But when you look again, here's India, and again, only 13% of the world identifies with the Hindu tradition. And when you look at the Hindu tradition, I was about 18, 19 when my studies, and I realized that Hinduism is really the same as what we call paganism, shamanism. Again, there's many different subsets, just like Christianity, over 30,000 different versions. It's the same thing in Hinduism to a degree. But the interesting thing is, when you look to it, they know, just like many of the indigenous tribes shared, that we're not alone. And in fact, they remember the times when the wars of the gods were going on, the wars between the Devas and the Asuras, openly in the sky. They have stories. I mean, when you look to the Ramayana, it's one of the most well-known stories in the world. And what does it say? What does it talk about? It talks about a woman that's taken captive by one of those beings we might call, in some circles, a Nephilim, an Anunnaki. Literally, he comes down, he sees this woman, and he's got to have her. He takes her even though she's promised to somebody else, and he kidnaps her. And those stories, Genesis 6, finding the daughters of man were beautiful. Well, this is a Genesis 6 story in the Ramayana. It gives you a lot more details because he goes around in a ship, a flying machine. They would recognize his machine and they would say, whoa, that's just Ravana's ship. You want to watch out for that guy. Because what does he do? He comes down, he takes what he wants, he sets himself up as God. He's God, he's king, he's priest, he's everything. He's ruling over these technologically inferior people and just taking whatever he wants, including people's betrothed, people's loves. This is exactly Genesis 6 on a bigger scale. When you look to what happened to those people, those hundreds of millions of people that were living in North and South America before the Europeans came here, and wiped away their tradition. And they wiped away their way of living. They herded them up into tiny little reservations. They stole everything from them. And the biggest thing also that they stole was their traditions, their knowledge. They westernized them. There is a story that goes out that they would utilize natives as scouts. But then when they started to make them cut their hair, their scouting ability seemed to be lessened. And, you could take that as the fact that hair is a receiver, which it is. And this is why they don't cut their hair in some traditions, or will cut it in certain ways. It's, again, because the hair is a receiver. It does help us pick up frequencies and information out there. But it's also because they pulled them from their system, and they were bringing them into a system that is not about connection to nature and connection to all different things, reading the signs of nature, feeling what nature is telling you. They were turning them into, again, European colonizers themselves. And, some of the most devout, like Catholics, literally live in Latin America. And when you go back pre-conquistador, they were all, sharing their own traditions and their own religious beliefs. Those things get wiped out, and then the stories get forgotten. And what do you remember? You remember what you're told from certain books. So they wiped out. Why did they do this? Well, primarily, I think, it's a method of control, and it's a method of taking away knowing where you come from, remembering the stories of those that came from the sky. And here you have David Grush talking about disclosure. And this is new from him. There'll be some truths that will be a hard pill to swallow. New David Grush. There's truly anonymous signatures in the sky, and the U.S. government understands it represents a form of sentient, non-human intelligence. I know that sounds very Star Trek, a la, Gene Roddenberry and Rod's dad's sci-fi series, but it's true. And I want you, the American public, to be comfortable or comforted with knowing the universe is teeming with life, it seems, and readily able to be explored. And the U.S. government does have a lot of information, I think, that will inspire Generation Alpha and Generation Z, Alpha and Omega. The American populace at large. It's going to be a new era. It's going to be a little uncomfortable, though. Some things are going to be hard to swallow. Yeah, like our religious indoctrination. It is one of the hardest things to swallow because, we've all been brought up pretty much in these westernized systems. And when you look, this is about the Dogon tribe, by the way, but all origin stories begin with the gods who come from the sky, created humans, then left, promising to return one day. They go by various names and descriptions, often linked to ancient aliens. There seems to be a pattern with all this. It's found in oral traditions, petroglyphs, ceramics, other art forms, ancient star maps, and other artifacts. Most myths depict the gods meeting with primitive humans, and their agendas vary depending on what we're talking about, which group, because there's more than one group of being. In fact, we're told in Deuteronomy 32:8 specifically, again, it's in Psalms, it's in multiple places, Plato's Critias, that they divided up the earth, our portion of the earth, because we don't really know the entirety of the earth. It's much bigger than what we're told. And they split it up amongst themselves. If you were having wars of the gods, and you have a truce be called, and then there's going to be some sort of defining lines. Again, North and South Korea were at war. They still are technically at war. There was a truce called, a ceasefire, and it was at a certain parallel. And this is the reality. There are certain tribes that are left under the control of certain alien species or ultra-terrestrial because they, may be here, may have been here for many, many generations in some cases. So when you look at this, the Dogon tribe knew about a star that's not visible. A star that's not visible. How did they know? Because, again, this knowledge was given to them by these beings, these star beings from other places. This is just a story that's repeated time and time again. But recognize, too, that when we're talking about creating humans. They're talking about genetic manipulation of the body that we inhabit, which is just simply a vehicle for experiencing this 3D reality. So the body has been modified. And in fact, what they've done is kind of like what they do in California with emissions. They throw other things in there to limit. They have limiters on humans. They've turned off some of our genes, so to speak, especially the ones that connect us to each other and connect us to the higher realms. They need to keep us away from the higher realms. You also, when you look to Africa, you get the Chitauri. They're reptilian gods that came and controlled this whole system and whole planet. Everybody was getting along fine. We did not have a monetary system. We simply bartered and traded. And then when these beings came, they gave us the religious systems, they gave us the political systems, they gave us the monetary systems with which to control us. Yes, these are not the creators of the universe. And when you think again and give them credit for creating the entire universe, you're talking about much, much lower level beings that are in service just to themselves. They rule through fear. But they're not the only ones that we come in contact with. In fact, there are so many stories of the benevolent shining ones, the ones that seem to be made of pure energy, pure light, as you look at some time-lapse footage over New Jersey. We probably have all seen a ship at some point, maybe didn't even realize it. You might have also seen some plasma beings, or what we would call, again, some of the shimmering ones, the benevolent beings that are higher dimensional, that guide us in a gentle way and do not impose their will on us. The ones that impose their will on us, well, those are the ones that took control of this planet thousands of years ago. And here's some sort of little apparent orb-like thing. But, again, there's so much illusion in the world, and you have a lot of people that want to poke fun at, the whole idea of life elsewhere as if it's ridiculous. But, for those that know, it's ridiculous to think there's no life elsewhere. That's truly insane to think that this is it and we're all that there is. So much has been hidden from us that it literally makes the ridiculous seem realistic and the realistic to seem ridiculous. This is what they've done to us. Everything that they've given us is inside out and upside down. Of course, you can't trust anything from a NASA broadcast, but I do trust things from older mythologies that resonate within. No, NASA, you can't trust anything coming from NASA. And yet, so many people have had encounters. This is in the waters around Puerto Rico. And I experienced something like this back in 2014. Well, literally, that was like the last real vacation back in 2014 on a cruise ship. And it was like that. And people were seeing this light that was seen. What is it? It doesn't necessarily have to be aliens, but ultra-terrestrial? Yeah, because again, a lot of beings live in the oceans. There's cities in the oceans. In fact, when you look to Google Earth, you could see a lot of unusual straight lines down there. Are they just residue of how they put it together? Seams in the picture puzzle that is Google Earth? Or are they really showing something that's there? And the fact that there is literally other societies on the planet, in the planet, above and around the planet that have always been there. It's just our governments that have kept us in the dark. And this was Area 51 area. Yeah, and our religious systems, because they're in on it. They are in on it. They know the bigger picture. And, they want to cover up all signs of, in some cases, the ones that they literally report to, because ultimately Homo sapiens do not run this show. But we're not alone. No, we've never been alone. Look at this. What is this? Again, there's so much out there. So much. There are so many different beings. It's not just one or two groups. It's not just, again, the Orion group and the Galactic Federation, or the Draconians and the Galactic Federation. In fact, there's so many different beings out there that are not aligned with anything but the natural order.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we're really at a precipice. We're on the cusp of having a whole different experience. I really believe that. It's so hard to predict how this is going to unfold, what it is it going to look like. But when we run into things like this, we have a few tools that we can turn to, and one of them is history, and especially some artwork in history. I think that's very, very important, things that have been around for eons and eons and eons that we can take a look at. And then also we have planetary alignments that we can look at and figure out, okay, well, we're at this planetary alignment. Well, what, was this the same what happened 2,000 years ago when we had this same planetary alignment? And a lot of it has been shown to be the idea that all of our religions were given to us, and the whole world's belief systems changed at one point during a certain very important planetary alignment, and we're kind of on top of those alignments right now. They move very slow because we're talking about the outer planets and the larger planets. So when we do hit an alignment, it takes time to unfold. But we have hit these alignments, and the unfolding has begun. And unless you really don't want to see it, you're going to see it. You're going to notice changes in the environment. It might be subtle at first, but it's catching on. And, I think it's out to the masses, but the masses are not very boisterous about it because they're just not sure who to talk to about it. You can't, we've been so conditioned to not speak our truth in fear of being shamed or being disliked. And humans, we are herd animals. We like to be in groups. It makes us feel safe. So if you have a different opinion, it's more likely that you probably won't share it in fear of being ostracized. And that's just something that is unfortunate, but it's the world we live in right now. But I do think that things are starting to loosen up.
Yeah, absolutely. And so much that's attributed to beings just like John at Patmos right here. What did he really get this revelation? Well, for one, people don't even realize that none of the apostles knew how to write. None of them knew how to write. They were all illiterate. At least this is truly the assumption of the experts, because it was rare to find people that were of that class doing that profession that literally knew how to write. No, these books were written pseudepigraphically, which means, again, they are really anonymously written by individuals that remain in the shadows, but they're attributed to people from our myths and legends. And so, again, who really gave us revelations? Was it really John? John, the disciple of Yeshua? No, I think most, scholars would say no, not the case at all. How about Yeshua? Was he really a starseed? I would say absolutely. This is the information that we got, is he understood what was happening. And so he's coming in to shed light. And this is why he's talking about being in alignment with the higher self. I and the Father are one, in not being in the dark. When the body be full of, when the light of thine eye be single, then the body will be full of light. In other words, when you open up your pineal gland, then more light can come in. And light is gnosis, it's knowledge, it's understanding, it's experiential. There are so many different pieces of artwork, some of them over 1,000 years old, that depict things that are very strange. And then now with our technology, we can do little things like, put something up from Da Vinci next to a mirror, and then you start wondering if this is giving us hybrid theory. Well, it's pretty obvious. It's pretty obvious. And this is something that is going to change humanity, especially those that have been brought up really dogmatically. Their belief systems will be more than challenged. They're going to be overturned, or they could start to look at things in a bigger and broader scope. A lot of people just are terrified of the idea that everything that they've put into their belief system has been a waste. Well, it's all part of a learning journey, and we just keep learning and growing. And if we will not allow new revelations to alter our perceptions into coming into alignment with the actual reality, then we're truly in the dark. And the chickens are getting wound up. I mean, you see all these figurines, and so many of them are exactly the same from different parts of the world. The UF battle over Nuremberg, Germany in 1561, we see big triangular ships. We see big triangular ships today. We see circular drones and them having battles and things exploding in the air. Yeah, when we talk again about agreements and peace treaties that sometimes get broken by non-terrestrial beings, then we may very well find us back in a period of time when there are wars right over our heads going on between the quote-unquote gods, which again are just beings that have more technology and understanding of how the universe works. And this is our reality. It's just basically that we have been kind of mind wiped by a system that has taken away our real traditions and our real knowledge of what was going on on planet Earth in days past. So this is the Dogon tribe again in Africa. This is just the reality. This guy, it's just information overload. I know it could be a lot to take in, but we thank you guys for being part of this, on this journey with us, and being part of the family. We couldn't do it without your support on Ko-Fi, Patreon, and also on YouTube memberships. Much love, source bless, and namaste.